Greetings, everyone. We have here with us today Gary Miles. Gary is a fellow litigator and podcaster. In addition, he's a success coach who helps attorneys, entrepreneurs, and professionals free themselves of the prisons that entrap them, be it financial, emotional, or physical. Gary is also the author of a top-selling book called Breaking Free. And like us, Gary is a wellness advocate. Outside of the professional sector, Gary is a husband, father of five, and a grandfather. So welcome, Gary. We are both so excited and honored to have you here with us today.
Well, Courtney, thank you for the really kind introduction. You're very as wonderful. And Annie and Courtney, thanks for the opportunity to be with both of you on your podcast. I'm really looking forward to it.
Likewise, likewise. So I know based on our discussion prior to the episode, and I follow you on LinkedIn, so I'm very familiar with what it is you do and the type of work outside of coaching that you have. But having worked in the legal sector, which it's hard to believe just looking at you that it's been 4 decades, and combined with the work that you do from the coaching end with attorneys and other professionals who work in really high stress environments, I have a sense that you have a good handle on just how stressful the professional world can be. So I'm curious to know, what are like the top 10 tunes that you see coming up for people that you're coaching, whether it's an attorney, an entrepreneur, or another professional who's working in a high stress environment?
What are the top stressors that I see coming?
Yeah.
Well, the first is for so many lawyers, at least, who work in that arena, it's the billable hours. They feel minimized because quality and efficiency isn't valued as much as the number on a timesheet, or at least that's how they feel. And it creates tremendous stress because when they're home at night, they're thinking, instead of watching my child's softball game, I could be billing time. And they always have this conflict where it's really hard to set a boundary between work and home life. I think it's a very competitive field. It starts in law school. You know, when I was in college, you got the best grade you can, and you didn't think about beating the other person. But most all law schools are now graded on a curve. So the key for me is to beat the two of you and come out ahead of you in school. And it starts then and it doesn't stop. I did litigation like you do. So we were always in a contest, my side against yours. We could be polite, we could be courteous, but it was still competitive and intense. And then sometimes that competition extends into your own firm. You're competing to make partner, or your partner competing to get a bigger share of the pie. And I think that can create a whole lot of stress as well. I think technology is a huge benefit, but also creates its own stress. Now with cell phones, clients, managing partners can get in touch with us anytime. And some respect our privacy. And I've talked to some lawyers where, if you don't answer my text in 5 minutes, that's a problem. You know, those kinds of messages. For me, when I started, which was 1978, setting boundaries wasn't an issue. All I had to do was close the door to my office and go home. There was not a way for me to work from home. There was not a way for someone to contact me through my office at home. And it was easy. Well, it wasn't easy. We had our own stresses, but technology with emails and texts, people feel they're just never able to get work done because they're always being interrupted.
Yeah. And there's so much valuable information in what you're sharing. I think, for one, this idea, which Annie and I have spoken about in other episodes, boundaries and setting boundaries. Even before the pandemic, I think it was blurred, like, because as you're sharing our devices, our iPhones, our laptops, and essentially our clients can follow us anywhere, or our colleagues or our bosses. And so whether we're at a child's baseball game or at dinner or the movies, it takes more effort to really draw that boundary, as opposed to in the 70s or 80s or even the 90s, when we exited our office, we left everything as much as we wanted to in the office. And I think even to your point, all these different devices, we refer to them in the mindfulness-based stress reduction program that I teach, we refer to them as the devices of mass distraction. That like we're constantly distracted, so it pulls us out of the moment. Even if we're choosing to show up for our child's sports game, like we're easily distracted so that we're not in the moment. We're not showing up for, he runs home or she, scores a goal. So it does take a certain amount of effort, I think, to draw those lines, but then to also be okay with it.
Right, it does,
Yeah.
it does, but I think
Yeah.
we have to be willing to do that. And, if it's with someone we work with, our partner or something like that, we could say, please, I need my time home alone. And unless it's really urgent, let it wait till Monday or let it wait until tomorrow morning. And if we're at the game, it's not the end of the world to turn off our phone. If the game's an hour, turn off the phone and leave it in the car, because we don't have to take a call or message in. We can look at it when we're in the car and return it then if it's urgent. So some of it is we want to make the best impression we can at work. We want to make the best impression with our clients. So we say yes, 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 instead of setting some sort of boundary and sticking to it. And most folks, if it's a place we want to work or a client we want to represent, will respect those boundaries.
Well, and to what you both are saying, we talk a lot about boundaries, and I preach this to my clients because it's so super important that you create these. But we've had to create boundaries from the beginning of time, right? It's not just technology and work boundaries, it's boundaries in relationships. It's being able to have confidence in your decisions. And this is my time with my children. And I didn't pick up the phone, but I don't answer the door during that time. I don't watch television during that time. Those are boundaries that a lot of people don't, or, your mother stopping by in the middle of the day, like, no, doesn't work for me. Like you need to call and let me know and ask if that's an okay time. So we've had to create boundaries for a long time. Many of us haven't, but it's important to sometimes relearn these things in the work. But another point is what you just said was so important, Gary, was it's an ego thing too. Like I always say to my clients, if when you turned it on do not disturb, like this phone for that hour and a half,
Right.
did anybody die? No. Well, did your deal fall apart? No. I know it's easy to say sitting in this seat, right? But you can do it. You can go on vacation for a weekend. You can do those things. You're not allowing yourself to do those things. And I find that to be a huge thing I'm talking about with my clients and setting boundaries, because they just, like you said, one of the attorneys says, you need to call me back in 5 minutes. Like, I know you don't hold a lot of power when you're being told that, but maybe you need to learn how to exercise your power and say, this is the time I'm going to be available. How do you deal with that when someone doesn't have power in the law industry and is told by a higher up, this is how you have to act, and it goes against your boundaries?
Well, I think you have to try to set the boundary anyway. But if the person is going to be that toxic as to be that demanding, then you just need to work somewhere else. I've learned one of my really, I'm sure you all preach this too, is acceptance. And so often I create my own stress by resisting those things I don't like. And I can't change that boss who's toxic and demanding. And if I try to set a boundary and it doesn't work, well, then I have a choice to leave and work somewhere else that's more compatible with my principles, my personality, my values. The trouble I had growing up is I was such a people pleaser for a lot of youth reasons of childhood experiences.
Sure.
And it's really hard for me to say no. And the tendency I have, Courtney asked me to come over and help her move this week, and I say yes. And then I'm like, darn it, I can't believe she asked me that. Instead of just saying,
So
no, I
holding that
can't. I said
resentment.
yes to someone and then resent the person who asked me and I said yes, because I'm so afraid to set a boundary and say, no, Courtney, I really can't help you.
I can't this weekend.
Things going on.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
obviously stupid to say yes to something I don't want to do.
No, it's your people pleasing, and it makes sense psychologically. It's not stupid. It's just what you want to do it. You want to be loved. It's how you feel loved. Sure, I'll be there for everybody, but then you mess up things for yourself. So it really comes down to self-worth, all of it.
Right.
That's the overarching theme, right? Do you agree?
Yes.
I, That, and it's sort of touching upon on something that you posted, I think just today, Gary, or yesterday on LinkedIn. It's we care. We care about how we're perceived by others. We care, like sometimes not even as an associate, I even as a more seasoned attorney, if I'm drawing boundaries and I'm not accessible or I'm not answering an email as fast as I feel like the client would like or a colleague would like, the wheels start going, like, what are they thinking? So it comes up even for, I think there's more pressure sometimes on a younger associate who cares of, how, if they're pleasing, if they're impressing the people that they're working with. So it's not only caring about, it comes from a good place that we care. We want to do a good job, but there's also another angle, and it's about caring about ourselves and how we treat ourselves, not always putting everybody else because before us because we feel like that's what we should do. And I misspoke. I have to just go back. I said devices of mass distraction. We call it actually weapons of mass distraction because it can be dangerous. The more we get pulled into 12 different directions, we really miss out on the moments of our lives. So I just want to go back. It's the weapons of mass distraction. But yeah, I think this comes,
I
it
think
comes
that's a
from,
really good label. And I know when I work with lawyers who say to me, I can't get anything done during the day. My phone rings, I get those emails, I start working on something, and I'm like, don't answer the phone. Don't look at
Block
the
your time.
take an hour, work on your project for an hour, and see who called you and call them back. See who emailed you and email them back. No one will be angry if they called you and you call them back in an hour. They don't know that you're working at your desk. You could be in court, but
yeah.
just don't allow those mass distractions to get in your way.
The other
The,
real quick thing is you just so the listeners understand what I've learned over the years is you actually teach people how to treat you. So people treat you the way you allow them to, and the way you say to, like the way you train them to teach you to treat you. Like, for example, if you have a friend that they get back to you at the end of the day, might get back to you the next day. You also have a friend who's going to respond right away that second. So when you do that, you allow people to know you're that person that responds in 1 second. But if you're the person that takes breath away from the phone, they know, well, unless it's a dire emergency and I'm banging on their door, I'm not going to get them for 24 hours. And that's okay. You're allowed to set those boundaries. And so you train people to know who you are and to kind of treat you in that regard.
That's really, really true. I've seen that with my own family. I know the kids who text me right back and the kids who don't. And then when the kid who doesn't, it's like, oh, is everything okay? Because they train me to expect an instant response, so
Yep.
that's a good point. What I like to do when people ask me something and I want time to reflect, the line I like to use is, I'm not sure. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. It's completely appropriate. No one's offended. No one's put off. I can think about it and make a more thoughtful response instead of my normal reactive, sure, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
I had
I love that.
a wise professor, I think I was a 1L in law school, who said, like, if there's a legal issue that we're asked and we don't have an answer, we don't know what the law, what the law of a particular state says, or, we don't want to say, I don't know, to say, I'm going to look into that, I'll get back to you. But again, to create that space so that we're not reactive, but we can sort of see what the possibilities are and then respond with more wisdom. But I wanted to step back, Gary, because you shared something that I grapple with. Like, again, it's going back to, you were saying, you don't have to answer the phone. You don't have to, people don't know that you may not be in the office. So maybe in your head, they're thinking that you're out shopping or you're down the shore, but they don't know all that you're juggling at your desk at home, or maybe you're meeting with a client. So just given my training in mindfulness, it's really helpful to notice the things that we tell ourselves, like when we're not answering the phone. A lot of times we go in the direction of negativity and we make it like they're thinking I'm lazy or they're perceiving me as not getting things done. When we can start to notice how we create that unnecessary layer of suffering for ourselves and we can let go of it, like not have to buy into it, then that's a bit of freedom. That takes away some of the negativity that really may not even be there. I mean, there are times when something comes up, it doesn't mean that everything's rosy in our work, but a lot of times without even being aware of it, we're creating unnecessary suffering. And I think that's where I know from I've seen your work, that's where I feel like you're so helpful, where you can really help people to identify those areas where they're getting in their own way. They're essentially trapping themselves. And once they can see that, that's like, oh, that's where the freedom lies. So I think
Not
that's
only do
helpful.
we worry about what other people think of us, we sometimes assume what they're thinking about us, which they really aren't. So
Yeah.
if I send you a text, my wife and I would like to have dinner, Courtney, with you and your husband next Friday, and you don't answer me, I think, what did I do wrong? Did I offend her? Why
Doesn't
isn't she?
like us.
Well, you're not thinking any of those things. You might have forgotten about the text, could be anything,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
I immediately default to, what did I do wrong? What's the problem? And I'm assuming what someone else is thinking when they really aren't thinking that at all. It's a story I tell myself, which just causes me my own stress.
Yeah.
I think also too, what I try to teach my clients is like, you don't need to qualify all the time. Like you're allowed to say, you don't have to say, sorry, I didn't get back to you, for a couple hours. You don't have to say, and because I was doing ABCD, wasn't at my desk. You can just say, hi, I'm just getting your text now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like you don't need to give reasons and qualify and prove yourself all the time, which again comes to, in my opinion, self-worth, right? Like know that you're an adult, you're allowed to be doing other things. I have kids, I have a husband, I have friends, I have a job. You don't have to say what you were doing for the last 15 minutes or the last 15 days. You can actually just show up and say, hey, glad we got to talk right now. And that's okay too, right?
Well said. Well said.
Freedom in that. Thank you. A lot of work. A lot of work is
It's not easy. It's not easy.
no.
No, as you're sharing that, I'm like, gosh, I do that a lot. Like I kind of give the backstory. It's my own, I don't know if it's insecurities or guilty conscience. I mean, there is nothing I need to feel guilty about, but it's something, it goes back to the things we tell ourselves, and are we buying
What is she
into it?
gonna think? I haven't texted her back, or you know what I think? If you don't text me back, she's busy because she has a job, she has 3 kids. I don't really even get that far. I think she'll get back to me when she can. I'm like the most impatient person ever. Like my fuse is so short. That's why Courtney helps me with mindfulness. But I will tell you, one thing I've become really patient with, and I'm not shooting my own horn, but this is a lot of work, is like, I don't tell those stories anymore. Like, and I stop myself if I start to tell the stories. Like, if someone isn't getting back to me, okay, like they're not getting that. I'm not going to sit and torture myself over the story anymore. Or I don't need you to tell me why you haven't gotten back in 6 hours. If you do, that's okay if it makes you feel better, but you don't need to. You certainly don't need to. Who am I to have to know what you were doing? You could be, God knows what you're doing. This is a family podcast. I'm not going to say, you could be doing anything, and it's not my business. Right. But we try to qualify constantly and prove, and so that people will know that we weren't doing this for rudeness or what. It's like, good person. I'm an adult, right? I'm allowed to put my phone on do not disturb for the day if I need to or want to. I'm not gonna lose my business. And that was really hard for me to learn how to do.
That is so healthy. That's something that I know I have to work on.
We could talk about all my unhealthy areas too, but I was focusing on the healthy areas. So I'm doing okay with that.
Gary, I know there are so many healthy things that you do and have done for yourself and that you're helping others to do in their lives. I'm curious about how you came into your role as a coach, and specifically how you work with a lot of attorneys, and we mentioned earlier entrepreneurs and other professionals working in high stress environments. But I'm interested to hear, and I'm sure listeners are, how you came into that role.
Yeah, so I did litigation for 45 years, and I had mostly very positive relationships with the other lawyers. And I know if you and I ever had a case against each other, it would be very positive and professional and respectful. But we were always in conflict. I always wanted to beat you, and you always wanted to beat me. And after 45 years of that, and particularly as I saw how the profession changed in so many ways, it became much harder than when I started, more stressful, more urgent, more competitive, less courteous, less professional. I realized I was tired of arguing with lawyers, that I wanted to help them and support them in any way that I could. Any way I could help them to be healthier and happier, I wanted to do that. I chaired the lawyer assistance program in my area for 20 years. I saw the stresses and what it did to some lawyers. And it can be devastating. And I realize sometimes when lawyers are so far gone that it's time for the lawyer assistance program to help them, it's very, very hard to reach them because the further down they go, their denial becomes so much stronger. So I wanted to help relieve some of those stresses and have lawyers shift their focus, as Annie talked about before, to a more positive story so that they can practice law and still enjoy it and like what they're doing and like being of service to their clients and like the intellectual exercise and presenting themselves in court or to a jury. So I just decided I'm dedicating myself now to being as helpful and supportive to other lawyers as I can in any way that I can.
That's refreshing just to hear, like to hear that we can enjoy the work that we do and the intellectual stimulation, because I think that it does get a bad rap and sort of the competitiveness and it can be, especially being that we're litigators, there can be some animosity, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like we can still do a really good job and be respectful to the other side. And I also think that in turn affects how our clients experience the litigation itself. So it's refreshing to hear that. Can you share with us whether it was an attorney or another professional, a success story where someone maybe was about to throw the towel in and they're like, I can't litigate anymore. I can't be an attorney. I can't be an entrepreneur or whatever type of profession they were working in. Can you share with us a success story for that person?
I worked with a young female attorney, did insurance defense work in Florida. Sweet woman, very kind, very gracious, but she was filled with insecurity and a lot of self-blame. And she would always think things were her fault that weren't. And she was overwhelmed by the stress and lack of confidence. And we worked together for some months. And in the beginning, sometimes she would cry when we would chat, just from the stress of what she was doing. But by the end, by their last session, at the end of 6 months, she was bubbling and happy. I said, "What do you want to talk about today?" She says, "I have nothing to talk about." So I guess we're done. She realized she was really good at what she did. She had areas where she could be better, but she believed in herself. She didn't necessarily assume everything was her fault. She didn't blame herself anymore. She just was very comfortable with who she was and where she was in the profession. And it was so gratifying. So gratifying. I enjoy doing my podcasts. I do a newsletter on LinkedIn and I enjoy that, but I don't get feedback from that. I don't know how it helps people, but to work with someone one-on-one, I can really see the changes that happen. And many of the changes are really kind of easy because so much of it has to do with what we focus on. If we focus on the fact that our partner is mean or that other lawyer is challenging or our client's demanding, that's what we're going to fill ourselves up with instead of thinking about the things that are good about what we do.
That really goes to show the power of the mind. Like we can choose where to focus our attention. And if we focus on negativity, well, we're gonna notice more and more negativity pop up. But if we can focus our attention on the goodness and on the enjoyable parts of what it is we do and the people we're around, that's just going to help promote more goodness. So I think after this podcast, I'm going to sign up with you, Gary, for 6 months just from what you're sharing. I could use a little bit more confidence and leading into my goodness at times. But it sounds a lot like, Annie, your work where is it like a 6 month where people want to work with you? Is it like a 6 month
Yes.
agreement
They do
or,
individual sessions, but they'd be too sporadic and
yeah,
it just wouldn't work. So now we do twice a month for 6 months. And some continue and some like it's all good. She doesn't need any more support.
great, great. Well, that's a pretty amazing result with an attorney no less. So
Do you do a 3-month program at all, either like a mini program or just the 6?
Right now, I'm just doing the 6-month program.
Just wondering. A lot of people ask me that. That's why I thought I'd ask you.
Yeah, I find that you can't make significant changes
Impact.
in how you look at things in 1 or 2 sessions. And people say, "Oh, can I just book a session with you?" I said, "You'd be wasting your time and your money. It doesn't work. Just let's give it time and you really will, it really will work." And everyone's different. Some people deal with perfectionism, some
Yep.
people deal with self-blame. You know, everyone, some people deal with self-doubt. Everyone presents with different issues, but for all of them, there are answers because the answers really lie within us.
yeah.
So true.
How about, so I know you help so many people, whether it's just in what you're sharing on LinkedIn or if people can work one-on-one with you, but how about in terms of yourself? What do you do to balance the stressors in your life and to achieve greater well-being?
Well, I'm blessed that where I'm in my life, my stresses aren't too bad. You know, I know how busy you are and Annie, you as well. Um, I only work until 4. I go out in the afternoon and I choose between going to the gym, practicing golf, or something like
Yeah.
that. But you know, for me, it's very important for me to stay balanced. I've been sober in recovery for a while, and balance is really, really important to me. And I think the 3 major things I work on every day are gratitude, acceptance, and mindfulness. I have a terrible habit of putting myself sometime in the future. I could actually be somewhere I enjoy being, but I think about what chores I'm going to do when I get home. Like, how stupid is that? Here I am at a nice family party. I'm thinking about what am I going to do when I get home? Like, why would I even think of that? So I really
Yeah.
have to bring my mind back to the present. I've learned that if I stop resisting things in my life that I can't control and that I don't like, I'm a lot more at peace and just to be grateful. I've had some family stuff going on recently that's very stressful, and I realize I've had to focus more on my gratitude work because on the whole, and those things I have no power over, so I have to stop thinking about them and focus on what's going on in my life that is good.
Well, the 12-step programs are ways of life. So I can hear it in your, I know a lot about them, and I can hear it in some of your verbiage that you're saying. And I mean, not holding on to resentments and then coming back to acceptance and no power over that, right? When you're able to say, I can't control that, and
Right.
just let it be what it is, there's a certain freedom in that as well.
There is very, very freeing.
And congratulations on your recovery and also really acknowledging resistance. Like that is important because I think that's something that many of us aren't aware of, like just how much suffering we create for ourselves because we want things to be a certain way. And there's a saying that really resonates with me that what we resist just goes down into the basement and gets stronger. Like I picture like this little resistance character doing curls and getting stronger. But when we can allow, when we can accept, even if it's not how we want it to be, when we can accept it and allow it to be how it is because that's what's here in this moment, then that's another way we can sort of take off that unnecessary layer of suffering. So thanks so much for sharing that.
The analogy that I like to use, my dad, now deceased, was loved the ocean his whole life. And we used to go to Ocean City, Maryland, and there's always an undertow there. And I'd go in and I'd be wanting to stay in front of our family umbrella and I'd be fighting it and then invariably find myself pushed down the beach a bit. And he said, instead of resisting it,
Let it be. Let go.
just let it flow you down. And then when you're too far down, just walk the 15 yards back in out of the water and walk up the beach and start over. So I like thinking of going with the flow instead of, you know, resisting the current.
Yeah, Yeah, no, that's a great image to hold on to, but to also remind you to let go, like
Right.
to
Well, that's
ride
the
the
thing
wave.
with my clients. It's always like, do you see how tightly you're holding the reins? Like, just loosen your grip. It's the same thing as you're saying, and just sort of let your hands go. When you can do that, it's a whole other ballgame, right? It's like we just hold on so tight, like it's the resistance and everything that you have said. We just say it in a different way to our clients, but
Right,
I mean the same thing.
right.
I'm gonna see if I can recall this, because this is another little image or story that can remind us how we can free ourselves when we let go. But there were these farmers in India who kept on, there were monkeys that kept attacking, like going into their crops and attacking their farms. And so they, what they did was they took a coconut and they put two holes in the coconut, and they tied the coconut through the one hole to the tree, and the other one, they put a banana inside the coconut. And so the monkey, being that monkeys love bananas, would climb the tree, and they would put their hands into the hole of the coconut to get the banana, and they would hold on tightly to the banana with the idea that they were going to take the banana and eat it, and so have you. So what they realized is that, or what they didn't realize is that when they clenched onto the banana, they couldn't get their hand out from the hole. But if they could just let go, they could free themselves. So it's a reminder, yet another little story or image that we can keep with us, that we can let go and we don't have to hold on to anything so tightly to free ourselves. So that just came to mind when you shared that, Gary.
I like
But
that.
yeah, yeah. So I know that you've shared so much with us today that I know there's so much that people can get from working together with you. And in addition to your podcast, where they can listen to your teachings and other guests who share wise resources to decrease stress, how can people contact you if they're interested in working one-on-one or to learn more about your offerings?
Um, Happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm very active there pretty much on a daily basis under my name, Gary Miles. And my website is easy to find, garymiles.net. And it has my book there, Breaking Free. It has all of my LinkedIn blogs. I've probably done 150 or so far. They're all posted there, along with all the episodes of my podcast. And if they're interested in connecting with me to talk about how coaching might be able to help them, they can reach out to me, Gary@garymiles.net, and I'll send them a link that we can set something up. You know, one of the gifts is when I began practice this lawyer, there's no such thing as a coach, no such thing. And, you know, when you look at the Olympics, which we had recently, every one of those amateur athletes had a coach. I'm into golf. Every professional golfer, best in the world, has a coach, and we all can gain from that.
Coaches
And
have coaches, yeah.
coaches have coaches, and you both coach folks you work with in mindfulness and the areas you work with, Annie, and you know your clients benefit from that as well. So
I just downloaded
mentally,
your 6 steps from imposter syndrome. That looked really interesting. I want to read that
right,
from your
great,
website.
thank you.
Sure.
And just so listeners know, I know you mentioned the podcast, but the name of the podcast is The Free Lawyer.
Free lawyer.
So people can listen to that, which I've been listening to, and it's really enjoyable. So Gary, thank you so much for your time here today. And I wish you all the best and look forward to continuing to learn from you.
Thank you, Courtney, and
Yeah.
thank you, Annie.
Thanks, Gary. It was awesome to meet you and learn about your story.
Thank you, and you as well.